talking about the mind, body, and soul. So I'm Amanda, and I'm delighted to be your host for this enriching evening. Um, so before we dive in to our session today, I would like to extend my welcome to our esteemed keynote speakers with us today. So let me introduce them to you. At first, we have our first keynote speaker, who is Krista Vanderschoot, who is a wellness coach and has 7 years of experience in vinyasa and prenatal yoga. She is also a transformational certified coach who focuses on wellness. And as our second keynote speaker, we have Kushani Bandara, who is a certified transformational coach with 4 years of experience working with young leaders in our community. And finally, we have Vanida Chowdhury as our third speaker for the day, who is the founder of Radical Edge Learning Consultants and also the co-founder of High Five Retreats with experience of 29 years in banking, entrepreneur, mentoring, and coaching, and heart leadership. So before we dive into the session, I would also like to inform all of you that at the end of our webinar, we would have a Q&A session to answer any of y'all's questions that y'all have. So without further ado, let me open the space and invite Krista Vanderschoot to share her valuable knowledge with us. Over to you, Krista.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for your lovely introductions. So I am Krista Vanderschoot. I am born and raised in the Netherlands, and I now live in Sri Lanka for the past 7 years. Yeah, I'm very excited to be talking to you today on this international or anticipation towards the International Women's Day, and about the connection of the mind, the body, and the soul, which is something close to my heart as a yoga teacher. So for me, when I go to my yoga mat, it's not just to break a sweat. It's also a place where I come to get quiet. I become still and I connect to my higher true self, how I like to call that. And when my students come to the mat, I encourage them to come the way they are. So maybe they're a beginner, maybe they are an expert, or maybe they are somewhere in between those two. And of course, the physical practice of yoga can be challenging sometimes, but nobody ever expects you to be the most flexible or to do any fancy forearm balances or headstands. So what we encourage in yoga is to always focus on the breath. So no matter which pose you are, breath is most important, and there's where the connection comes in as well. Always keeping in mind that wherever you are, this too shall pass. So those two things that I just mentioned are two important life lessons that come with practicing yoga. The first one being to accept who you are. Of course, you can have goals. Of course, you want to improve, but also always coming from a place where you respect yourself at this very moment. So being good enough the way you are right now. And the second one is an even more important life lesson, which is you can breathe through whatever uncomfortable situation you are in on your mat, but also in your personal life. So yeah, for me that is true empowerment and something that yoga has taught me. So I think most people that are participating today are either coaches, or they have studied NLP, or they have studied any type of science around the mind. So I want to just give you my intake on the yoga angle of this all. I think the mind is a fantastic instrument or tool, but most human beings, most people rather suffer than benefit from the capabilities of our mind. So they say yoga is a means to transcend the mind. But what does this really mean? So according to Patanjali, who is very famous. They say the father of yoga. He has written the Yoga Sutras, which you could compare not to the Bible, but it's like texts and texts about how to live life, and it explains yoga very nicely. And he says that if you can rise above the modifications of the mind, if you stop being a part of your mind, identifying yourself with your mind, that is true yoga. So I wanted to share a slide with you of Patanjali. Give me one moment. There we go. Okay, and there it is. So here he is, of course, statue, but he is considered the father of yoga, Patanjali. And I am going to talk a little bit more about him and about the sutras. And out of the sutras, he has created the 8 limbs of yoga, which I want to explain to you. It's a nice way of looking at what yoga is, because most people think about the physical practice of yoga when they think of yoga, but there's a whole philosophy behind it. And actually pranayama, which is breathing exercises, and meditation is also all yoga, and then eventually mastering the mind. So all the influences of the world, they reach us through the mind, and we have certain filters, certain things that we bring with us from childhood that automatically put judgments to those influences that we get. And it also creates separation between you and me, between here and there. It creates time, it creates space. And Patanjali says, or yoga says, if you can drop the mind, that all dissolves, so everything becomes one. Now that is, of course, nicely said and done, but how do we do this? And is that even applicable to us in this day-to-day life, in this modern world that we live in? So I will, in the end, share with you how this works for me, how this applies for me, and what it has brought me, and hopefully can bring you as well. But I first want to go over those 8 limbs of yoga. So the 8 limbs are not like a staircase where you start and you have to climb to proceed to the next. This is actually something that exists linear, and everything complements each other. So all of this together is yoga. I won't bore you for very long. I'll start with number 1. This limb is called yama, and it's basically our behavior towards the outside world. There are 5 yamas, which I will tell you in a moment. But if you think of yama, you should think of you do upon others what you want others to do to you. So basically live with a clean slate in your best possible behavior. And the 5 yamas are non-violence, non-stealing, truthfulness, lack of greed, and living in a state of awareness. The second one you see here is the niyamas, and this is your behavior internally. So how do you speak to yourself? How do you carry yourself, your cleanliness? And again, here there are 5 niyamas, which are contentment, so the practice of gratitude, being grateful, cleanliness, good attitude, a spiritual practice, and self-study. So now if we go to the 3rd limb, there asana comes in, and asana means the physical practice of yoga that I think everybody knows about. So as you can see, out of those 8 points, that is only one part of yoga. So you come into a yoga class, moving through your physical yoga asanas. The idea behind this is, of course, to keep your body strong and fit, so health, but also to work on discipline. So here, with this healthy body, you have the discipline then to sit in lengthy amount of times in meditation. And it's interesting because there are different yoga practices actually created for different people. So if you see the very fidgety person, maybe very active, always tapping the foot, this person should do Ashtanga yoga, which is a quite intense physical practice for about 1.5 to 2 hours. And after this, everything is out and he can now be grounded and sit in meditation. Whereas maybe another lady who is already very centered and grounded can do a much calmer practice or can just meditate to start with. So different asana practices for different people. Then the number 4 is pranayama, which is quite powerful. This is breathing exercises, which you do during your asana practice as well. So mastering the breath, and with that, realizing how your breath is actually connecting the mind with the body and also the emotion. So often people have very heavy emotional releases when they move through these breathing exercises. So that is number 4. Then the first 4 limbs that we just spoke about are the ones that are very, like, these are more of actions that you do. Then if we move on to the 5th limb, we are now moving into the mind. So the 5th one is pratyahara, and this is actually also something you do when you come to your yoga class. It is just bringing your awareness from the external world inwards. So you start focusing more on the breath, more on the body, away from your to-do lists, the things happening around you. Like if you're teaching a yoga class and there's this immense sound of a bus driving outside, and your yoga student is now not reacting to that, then you know you've brought them into a certain state where they are really focusing. So that is pratyahara. Then number 6 goes to dharana. And here we go a little bit deeper into the meditative state. Here we are focusing, for example, on a chant or on a mental image to extend the periods of time where you're seated. So you could silently repeat a certain mantra, an affirmation, or focus on something that you create in the mind for lengthy amounts of time, to then eventually reach dhyana, which is complete meditation without any tools. So here thoughts might pop in and out of the mind, or the mind goes completely quiet. This is not something that is easily achieved, and that's also not necessary to achieve it. It's the attempt that brings all of these benefits to then get samadhi, which is also known as enlightenment, where everything becomes one. So now, of course, we are not living on a hilltop in an ashram without any things to do. We actually are women. We often work full-time, manage our children, manage our households, all kinds of things. So it's not smart to drop the mind, right? But what I actually hope to explain is that with this full practice of yoga, so not only the physical practice, you can create a little pocket inside your life, a little place that you can go to maybe once a day, maybe less, maybe more, where you connect to yourself, and with that notice and become more of an observer of your mind instead of letting your life be led by the mind. So instead of reacting, you are now responding because you are in touch with yourself a little bit more. So this practice could be all kinds of things. It could be you waking up and doing a pranayama, a breathing exercise. It could be you going to a yoga class. It could you be doing gardening for an hour where you focus on your breath, on your thoughts. Or it could be your morning walk for 30 minutes where you look at the beautiful nature. Anything that works for you. It does not have to be a yoga class or anything specific. So let me see where I am. Got a little bit carried away. So we've spoken about the 8 limbs now. And then what I wanted to do is a small meditation. Yeah. So I hope you are in a place where you can do this. If it's weird, don't worry about it. Just maybe bring your gaze down instead of closing your eyes. May you sit in a very busy cafe or something. So I will guide you through this meditation. It's a very short one, and I hope it's a nice introduction for you to be introduced to this practice. So close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. If not, just bring your gaze down and start deepening your breath a little bit. So inhaling and exhaling, maybe taking the deepest breath you've taken all day. And as you inhale, notice how your rib cage expands and how your belly slightly rounds. And every time you exhale, you try to relax and let go a little bit. Maybe your fingers, your shoulders. You can soften the skin of your forehead and your jaw. Now you start breathing all the way down to your sit bones. And every time you notice you start being distracted by your mind, don't judge it. Just bring your attention back to the breath. Following the inhale, the expansion of the inhale, and then following the exhale, trying to let go, relax and release. It is okay not to have positive thoughts, feelings, and emotions all of the time. Allow yourself to simply notice your thoughts and feelings just as they are. Rest your mind on your breathing in and out without any judgment. Positive or negative thoughts and feelings are bound to arise, stay for some time, and then ultimately pass away. Now visualize your thoughts like clouds in the sky. Sometimes maybe dark and ominous, and other times reflecting the bright sun in colorful and brilliant ways, but always moving and in flux. You start becoming the observer. Observe your thoughts and feelings with the understanding they are bound to change rather than suppressing them inwardly or reacting to them in some outward way. Mastering this is the key to coming out of all kinds of suffering. Continuing your inhales and your exhales naturally and soft. Taking one last deep inhale as you sit here, expanding, filling yourself up with lots of love. And then as you exhale, release everything. Exhale lots of love out, giving back. And then you slowly open your eyes. You come back. Namaste. Thank you everyone for listening to me and for being here today. Have a beautiful International Women's Day tomorrow. And yeah, I'm excited.